What if I told you a quarterback would have 4 neck surgeries, get released from the team that drafted him, be told he may never play the game of football ever again, would not only go on to win Comeback Player of the Year just 1 year after being released, but the following year will also go on to have one of the greatest regular seasons by a quarterback in NFL history. In the 2013 regular season, Peyton Manning left no doubt, making every single throw, mentally destroying opposing defenses in what looked like the best version of Peyton Manning since 2004. It had many believing that this unbelievable season could finish with a fairy tale-like ending. However, the light at the end of the tunnel was not what anyone saw coming. And today, we'll talk about the heartbreaking story. The most memorable season of Peyton Manning's career was fueled by his desire to prove that he is still good enough to compete in the NFL at an all-time great level. Because 2 years prior to this moment, his entire NFL future was put into question. But to understand the entirety of the story, we have to go back even further. It's 2006. Peyton Manning takes a nasty hit against Washington, a hit that in today's NFL probably causes an investigation.
Manning giving ground, loses the ball. Peyton Manning, Joe Salavea got him stepping up in the pocket, and then Andre Carter and Philip Daniels, and that's the hit there. Philip Daniels going up high on him around his neck.
Either way, many believe this hit caused the neck issues Peyton Manning continued to play through, and in most cases, spinal injuries only get worse over time. So now it is 2010. Peyton Manning would have surgery to relieve pain in his neck caused by a pinched nerve that has been bothering him for over 4 years. Even with that, he played the entirety of the 2010 season, but followed that up with another neck surgery the following year on May 23rd, 2011. To repair a herniated disc in his neck, and it was at this point he is expected to be ready to go by the preseason. That was until it was reported that he had another neck surgery on September the 8th, 2011, causing him to miss the entire 2011 season. And we would later find out in between those dates he would have had another surgery, a date that till this day is still unknown. And without him, the Indianapolis Colts were terrible. Loss after loss after loss, as they proceeded to go 2-14 and receive the #1 pick in the draft, where they will go on to draft Andrew Luck, essentially turning the page on the Manning era.
We're here to announce the conclusion of Peyton's playing career with the Colts.
In life and in sports, we all know that nothing lasts forever.
A move that Peyton Manning did not want.
You mentioned 2011 and the neck injury and everything that happened. Did you think, wow, it can't end this way?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, my goals were, I think, like what any NFL player should have as a goal, was to play your entire career with the team that drafted you.
But he came to terms with it and proceeded to sign with the Denver Broncos. And in his first year there, he won Comeback Player of the Year. However, that wasn't good enough. Peyton Manning wanted to prove that he is still one of the best in the game. So with 1 full year post-injury under his belt, Peyton Manning would prepare to have one of the greatest seasons in his career. If a Week 1 matchup could talk, the Broncos' Week 1 matchup against the Baltimore Ravens would tell you everything that you needed to know about how great of a season this would be. When Peyton Manning and the Broncos stepped on the field, this was just not any game. It was a rematch against a team that eliminated the Broncos just 1 season before. And this time, the results would be entirely different. 462 yards, 7 touchdowns with no interceptions. In a revenge game where the Broncos made a clear statement that they were legit, and this time around, we would see just that. The following week would be no different, as the Denver Broncos were on a mission. 307 yards, 2 touchdowns against his brother and the New York Giants, in a game Eli would love to have back. The following week for Peyton, 374 yards, 3 touchdowns against the Raiders, showing no signs of slowing down, setting a record at that time for the most touchdown passes through 3 games with 12, as he still has not thrown a single interception. His dominance would continue into week 4 in their 52-20 win over Philly, before Peyton Manning would throw his first interception of the season. However, a Peyton Manning interception in 2013 would not be the only rare event we saw during this game. Yes, in a 51-58 win over Dallas, we would get a Peyton Manning rushing score, and with those wheels, I wonder why we didn't see this more often. They will go on to make quick work of the Jacksonville Jaguars the following week. So Peyton Manning, at this point 6 weeks into the season, had 2,179 yards, 22 touchdowns, somehow a rushing touchdown.
He's got the football! He fooled even the cameraman. I said it all week.
The man was looking absolutely unstoppable, with a trip coming up against a team, a place that he called home for 13 long years. But there was a new sheriff in Circle City. Andrew Luck and the Colts were fresh off of a loss to the Chargers and would now have to host a red-hot Broncos team led by Peyton Manning. There was no way the Broncos would lose this game. Peyton Manning threw for 386 yards, 3 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. However, the Colts would come out on top, and on that day, the Broncos lost the turnover battle 3-1. A fumbled punt return, a Peyton Manning interception, and a fumble on the Colts 3-yard line. In a moment, it looked like the Broncos could take the lead, which would ruin Peyton Manning's return to the city of Indianapolis. And the key word in this loss being turnovers, something that almost cost them the following week against Washington. At one point, they found themselves down 21-7. And eventually 21-14 entering the fourth quarter. Peyton Manning was having an unusually off day, matching his interceptions for the entire season in just one game alone. But before the blink of an eye, something changed. The Broncos would score 31 points in the fourth quarter to complete the comeback and win the game 45-21. The following week, Manning would bounce back from his 4-turnover game and follow that up with a 4-touchdown performance, 330 yards, no turnovers, and then cruise by the Kansas City Chiefs 27-17 before eventually meeting up with a familiar rival, but this time around the Broncos will find themselves on the wrong part of a comeback. 24-0 Broncos at half ended up being 34-31 Patriots in overtime, and that's your ball game. The Tom Brady led Patriots scored 31 unanswered points before the Broncos would tie the game to send it into overtime. But in that period, this field goal would end the game. Peyton would have his lowest amount of passing yards of the season with 150. He had 2 touchdowns but added an interception, and this was without a doubt the lowest part of the season for the Denver Broncos. Fumbles continued to be a problem, and the narrative of Peyton Manning struggling in cold weather due to his injuries started to become a real concern. But at 9-2, the Broncos still maintained control over their own destiny, and over the next 5 weeks, they would solidify their #1 seed in the AFC.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
tell me Decker.
Eric
Decker,
Decker,
nice
the
ball.
first Bronco with a 4 TD game.
On the ensuing
Post
possession,
corner post. That was a nice route down low.
Manning
LT
to
post.
Decker.
Look, here we go again. I mean, King Dunlap and Chad Reinhardt, I mean, they just dominated.
Next Broncos possessions later. Could this be the record? And it's Julius Thomas.
Passing mark here in the second, looking for Demaryius Thomas. That's the prettiest pass I think Manning's thrown all year.
Going 4-1 to finish the season, with their only loss being to the Phillip Rivers-led Chargers. Peyton Manning would throw 19 touchdowns, 1,755 passing yards, and just 3 interceptions over that span, to make his total for the season 5,477 passing yards, 55 touchdowns, setting a single season record for the most touchdowns passes and yards, passing Tom Brady's previous record of 50 and Drew Brees' previous record by 1 yard. And as great as those accomplishments were, Peyton Manning was looking for something much bigger. Remember that loss against the Chargers in the regular season? Well, the Broncos would get their revenge. 230 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. The Broncos added 133 rushing yards to help overcome 2 turnovers and maintain the lead in a 24-17 win over the Chargers. And with one familiar face out of the way, the next challenge would require an all-time great performance. 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, and one of Peyton Manning's best games in his playoff career. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Broncos now successfully redeemed 2 losses from the regular season by beating opponents they previously lost to, which made the feeling of making the Super Bowl that much better. It seemed like everything was aligning for that fairy tale-like ending to Peyton Manning's career, coming back from all the injuries, beating 2 great quarterbacks in the playoffs, one being his arch rival in Tom Brady. What else could make this playoff run better? The actual Lombardi. But there was one thing, one team, one juggernaut that stood in Peyton Manning's and the Broncos' way. The Legion of Boom. As we know now, a legendary all-time defense, but they were looking to stamp their mark on NFL history, and they were hungry. So what I and millions of people around the world would see, depending on what side of the ball you were on, was pure heartbreak. On the first play of the game, the ball will be hiked over Peyton Manning's head, not knowing it at the time, but this would essentially represent the entirety of the game. A game in which the old phrase coined by Bear Bryant that everyone knows or at least have heard of before, that defense wins championships. So in the #1 scoring offense in NFL history, a team that scores 606 points in the regular season meets the #1 defense in the NFL, and that defense puts up the first points of the game, the results would be obvious. The Seattle defense dominated, forcing 4 total turnovers. Denver trailed 22-0 by halftime. One of those turnovers was a Peyton Manning pick 6. Denver's defense wouldn't generate a single turnover. Everything that could go wrong went worse. Peyton Manning had 280 passing yards, mostly when the game was already out of reach, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. It was the only time all year the Broncos failed to score at least 20 points, putting an end to the all-time great offensive season.
I don't know if you ever really get over it. It's a difficult pill to swallow. I think you have to find a way to deal with it and process it. And like I said, if you can, to try to fuel it to make you a better team next year.
With that Super Bowl loss came the bittersweet reality. Peyton Manning had a historical season, taking home MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, which are great accomplishments, but those are things that he had done before. This will be his 5th MVP, which is the most in NFL history, but it was not the award he was looking for when the season started. And as that season in particular had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows with that heartbreaking loss, many wondered, would Peyton Manning ever win that 2nd Super Bowl ring? Well, it didn't take long for us to actually get that answer. The Broncos would go on to defeat Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers in a 10-24 ball game. As the injuries started to pile up, it was one of Peyton Manning's hardest seasons to finish.